Hello everybody, it's your Corvette friend Lyle from C&S Corvettes here in Sarasota, Florida, and today I'm going to talk to you about what the true costs of Corvette ownership are and how to avoid the pitfalls of going into overspending on your car. Before we do that though, please take a time to subscribe, like, share. If you want to send me a tip on Super Thanks, awesome, thank you very much. Again, the more that you guys can do that for me and tell your Corvette friends about us here, the more I can do for you. Thank you for doing that. As far as Corvette ownership costs go, we're not talking about things like brakes, tires, belts, all the things that wear. I don't care what car you have, you're going to be replacing those on a regular basis if you drive the car regularly. Granted, with a Corvette or any other higher end sports car, the brake pads may be a bit more expensive, the tires, because they're wider and taller, may be a little more expensive, but it's not going to be an outrageous difference between a Pontiac Grand Sport and that, right? I mean, they're all kind of going to be similar, a little more for the performance stuff. What I want to talk to you about today is what Corvette ownership costs and how to think about Corvette ownership cost. Yes, I hear you. Insurance. Everybody thinks Corvettes are really expensive to insure. Now, if you're under 35, or if your driving record looks like something from Grand Theft Auto, yes, they're going to be expensive to insure. However, if you're 35 and over, and or your driving record's nice and clean, they really don't cost that much, because insurance costs have more to do, once you reach your late 20s, early 30s, your insurance costs have more to do with the cost of repairing the car than it does your personal possible behaviors, right? So Corvettes are not terribly expensive to repair when compared to things like a Jaguar or a Range Rover or a Rolls Royce, right? So insurance is going to work just fine. If you don't drive your Corvette on a regular basis, if it's like taking it out once or twice a month for a week, for an evening cruise, and you're only putting between 3,000 and 5,000 miles a year on the car, you definitely want to consider collector car insurance through a company like Hagerty, because they're going to give you full coverage, usually agreed upon value, and they'll limit you to mileage that you say you're going to drive, and they'll hold you to it, but it's going to be less expensive than insuring it like a car you drive every single day. So check out Hagerty. There's other ones, but Hagerty's the one that I'm most familiar with. They're a really good company if you need them. Long-term maintenance costs. We're going to divide this up into antique cars, meaning things like anything from like 1982 Corvette and back, and then modern driving cars, anything from say 97 and up, where people are using them as transportation as well as for fun. Let's cover the antiques first. Antique car maintenance costs. All depends on the car that you buy. And I don't mean what kind of car. I mean the condition of the car, the specific car that you choose. If you are going to go out and buy a completely done, fully maintained, everything on it works and it has been well cared for car, and you're probably going to pay through the nose for it, that car is going to cost you less in the long run than if you go out and buy a it just needs a few things project. Here's why I say that. A car that has been completely gone through, and I'm not talking about a numbers matching restoration, I'm talking about a car that has had the full mechanical workup done and that all of its needs have been met regularly throughout its life through the last owner. Okay, just to clarify. If you find one of those cars and you pay too much for it, it's still going to be cheaper than buying a car that has a bunch of needs, especially if you're not the type of person who has the knowledge, the skill, the tools, and the ability and the desire to do a lot of work yourself. Because if you start with a car that you paid $15,000 less for than that really nice no excuses car, figuring you'd be able to save a little money by fixing it, a little bit at a time or by yourself. You might be able to fix it by yourself if you're not counting your time as worth anything. If you're just putting parts and time into it, you might be able to save a little bit of money. But that's a small percentage of the population and getting smaller every day. If you buy it thinking that you'll just be able to get by for a while and not spend any money on the car, you're wrong. You're wrong. It's going to start costing you money right away. And if you get into it and you have to pay a professional shop like us to do a bunch of the work for you, you could very quickly reach or surpass the price you would have paid for the really nice car that didn't need anything when you bought it. So that's something you need to think about because it is tempting when you see a cheap special car to go, man, that's so cheap, I just gotta have it, I'll make it work. If you have the ability, okay, but if you don't, it's still gonna be cheaper. If you don't know which end of the screwdriver goes in the palm of your hand, it's still gonna be cheaper to buy the nicest car possible and pay too much for it knowing you're getting everything you're supposed to be getting, which of course you're going to double check by having it looked at by a third party before you buy it. We've had that discussion before. So make sure you get it inspected, but if it is what it's supposed to be, even if it's a few $1,000s too much, buy that car. You won't regret it. The other thing you need to know about antique collector style cars is even that car, the one that you've just paid too much for, you listened to everything I said and you bought that car and it is, for all intents, perfect. And I have a hard time saying that word because there's no such thing as perfect in the automotive world. But let's say it's really close. Old cars, when you drive them, you go take them out, you drive them, it's nice, it's a sunny day, drive by the beach, you're out with your lady, you bring it home, you put it in the garage, everything's fine. Next time you go outside to start that car, 3 things don't work. It didn't move, nothing attacked it, didn't go anywhere, but 3 things that were working when you parked it are now not working, and now you have to address those. This is something we deal with here at the shop all the time. When we get a car in that we want to fix up, or fix the few little things it needs and sell, which we only do about half a dozen times a year, we aren't huge into that. Here's what we do. We get everything fixed, and then Steve or I drive it home, and when we come back, we got a list. Well, this, and this. So we have our guys address those things. Now, in theory, everything is right. We drive it home again. We come back with a different list. If the first list had 6 items, maybe this one has 4, but we're going to do this 3, 4 times until we get to a point where we can drive that car 2 days in a row and have no punch list. Then and only then is that car ready for sale, in our opinion. But that's the way these old cars are. So expect it. If this is your first old car, expect that's what they're going to do, because I promise you they will. Antique cars are like people. They have individual personalities, and they need to be treated as such. You don't know how many people have had their hands in one before. You don't know what shade tree mechanic or hobbyist got in there and instead of fixing things the right way, just fixed it to make it work. So these are all things that you will learn if you have a full investigative inspection done before you buy it. But be aware of those things because, you know, the history of a car will tell you what its future is going to be oftentimes. Moving into modern cars, 97 and newer. Now you're going to say, well, Lyle, you said C3 at back in 97 and newer. Why aren't you talking about the C4s? I'll get to them. They're in their own category. But 97 and newer, electronics obviously play a very large part in those cars and the extended maintenance cost over the life of the vehicle that you wouldn't have had in a 1979 Corvette. Now, granted, these cars do a lot of things that car couldn't, but you need to take that into account. Discontinued electronics are the real problem. Things like the infamous electronic brake control module from the 97 to the 2000 that is not repairable and cannot be replaced, and they're never ever going to make more. Things like that you need to be aware of, because if you're buying one of those cars and the light, the check ABS light isn't on right now, that's no guarantee that it won't be on tomorrow. And if it becomes a problem, there is no good solution for it, at least not one that I've figured out, and I've been doing this a very, very long time, and this is all we do. In fact, if you know how to rebuild one of those modules, just message me quietly so I can be the one to say I figured it out, okay? Thanks. Best thing you can do for these cars is consistent use. Drive them regularly. You don't want cars to sit. That goes for old, new, anything. Sitting cars is bad for cars. We've covered this before. Drive it regularly, at least 45 minutes every 2 weeks. Not meaning in 15-minute stints. I mean, you got to let it run and drive for 45 minutes. It's going to take 20 minutes to get all the systems up to temperature, and then you want to drive it for another 20 or 25 minutes at temperature to get rid of all the moisture in all the systems. Best thing you can do for your car, bar none, short of keeping it in a garage. When you're trying to figure out what that C5, C6, C7 Corvette's going to cost you, assuming you don't have some kind of extended warranty that covers it bumper to bumper for the next 80 years. Here's the way I figure it. Running those cars, ownership cost of those cars, beyond tires and brake pads and the wear items, we're talking about mechanical failures above and beyond stuff that's meant to wear out. If you figure between $1,000 and $1,500 a year, you're probably going to be okay. Now, that doesn't mean that necessarily every year you're going to have to spend that amount of money on the car to keep it on the road and keep it working. What it does mean is that ticker, January 1st, you can figure that you owe that car another $1,000 or $1,500. So let's say that you drive that car for 4 years. You started out with brand new tires and brand new brake pads. You don't drive the car hard, you don't abuse it. And all you had to replace in that 4 years was wiper blades. You're like, man, other than oil changes, I'm doing pretty well. I got news. That's 4 times $1,000 or $1,500. So what's going to happen is at some point, you're going to take that car in, it's going to make a weird noise, something's not going to be right, and you're going to find out that you have a $4,000 to $5,500 bill coming. That isn't that the car is so expensive to maintain, you just delayed the expenses until something broke, which happens. It's not your fault, but in your mind, you need to think that it's going to cost me X amount every year to own and drive this car, above and beyond insurance, above and beyond everything, and you need to be putting that aside somewhere in its own account, like in escrow, so that it's there when you need it, because you really don't want to end up in a position where you're in that 30-day window in one time in 4 years where, man, I'm a little short on cash, because that's when that car is going to break. Believe me, they know. I don't know how they know, they know. So plan ahead, and just like you make a car payment, pay yourself every month or every quarter, put money into that account so that when that big bill does come due, you're ready for it and you know it's coming. That's the best advice I can give you that will give you peace of mind and allow you to maintain your Corvette in the best way possible. If you have any questions or comments about this, if you have an interesting story or a funny story about your life dealing with one of these older cars, or trying to afford to fix it, whatever, share it in the comments below, because I'd like to make a follow-up video with some of your stories. And maybe I can get some pictures of your cars on the stories I pick. If I do, I'll email you and ask for some. I look forward to seeing what you have to say about it. I hope you found this helpful. Have a good week. What? That camera die?
It flashed formatting and quit recording, even though it's still on in the middle of recording. So